G'day. So a question I get, if somebody brings me a fridge and it's not economic to repair it, what do I do? So the first sort of conclusion, I guess most people, or they say, it's not economic to repair it, go and buy a new one, is usually the first thought. Well, that's not necessarily the best idea, and I'll just sort of discuss that here. So why isn't it a good idea? Well, the new fridges aren't that flash, quite frankly, and I think the manufacturers are, certainly compromising the performance of these new fridges by, cutting back on some of the costs, not to you as the purchaser, but their build costs, and that's compromising performance of the fridges. And I'm seeing that all the time on a lot of the new fridges. So let's have a look at a example of that here with a typical Waeco fridge, and this is, I'm seeing this across the board, this situation, but we'll have a look at a Waeco. So what I've got here is a 80 litre Waeco, and I've got a 95 litre Dometic, which is the successor to it. So this is the earlier series versus the latest version of it, if you like. So we'll just quickly have a look at this one. This is a Waeco CF80. Now, the CF series came out in 40s, 50s, 60s, 35s or something. Anyway, it came out in various versions, but in this particular size, we're doing a sort of like-for-like comparison here. This is a CF80. This was a sort of a dual zone. You can see in here, it's got a removable wall, so it can be all fridge or fridge and freezer. CF80, and they also came out as a CF110, which is a bit bigger. Now, when we have a look at how this thing works, we have a look at the components that make it up. In here we've got the compressor, and then this is a C-cop, which is the successor to Danfoss, and this particular one is a BD50. That's a 5 centimetre displacement compressor. So it's the cylinder, if you like, in the compressor. It has 5 centimetres of area. Or cubic volume is probably the correct term. We've got a heat exchanger here. This is where the heat that's extracted from the fridge is pumped out. That's 120 by 120 millimetre with a fan on it. So it's just a cover goes off there, sucks air in here, blows air out here. The case on this fridge, and all the fridges, typically they're just filled with expander foam, which is a poor insulator. It's got lousy insulation properties. It's just a gap filler. So they drop the guts into the fridge and then fill up the case with the expander foam. Now, Waeco produced this fridge for a global market. So part of the reason they put this BD50 in it is that it's got the capacity to pull down the fridge temperature quickly, and typically this fridge will pull down the temperature in probably 30 to 40 minutes. It'll be at working temperature as a fridge. So and it doesn't have any troubles doing that. And now also this fridge has to be able to cope with additional heat load when somebody puts more contents in it. This has to be able to compensate and pull the temperature down for that. But it also has to overcome the fact that this case is filled with a non-insulating foam and loses cold out through the walls, if you like. And this is evident in hot, humid conditions when you can see the outside of these fridges covered in moisture all down the side here. And they're cool to the touch in here. And if they've got a bag on them, you put your hand in, they're damp. So there's losses out through the lid and the sides and everything else. And the compressor has to be able to cope with that at high temperatures, 30 plus degrees, 35 degrees maybe higher. And also when you go and put hot beer in it, or food or whatever it is, it can overcome that, plus overcome the losses. That was their design sort of thoughts, and they made this fridge for the global market, Africa, Australia, Europe, and the US, etc. So it was able to operate in all of those areas very successfully. Really good fridge. Now if we go and have a look at the current model in a sort of equivalent, let's have a look at that. Okay, so this is the Dometic, who now own Waeco, took over Waeco, 2007 they bought the business, dual badged it for a few years from 2013 on to 2017 or something, and then Dometic only, so this model is post 17, this is actually a pretty current model. I'll have a look at the equivalent. So here we've got a 2.5 centimetre displacement compressor here. The ACV 25 is 2.5 centimetres, half the size. This is a 95 litre fridge. The other one was 80. This is 95 litres. So now we've got a 2.5 centimetre displacement compressor trying to pull down the temperature of a substantially larger internal surface area or cubic capacity. And you know, this thing struggles to do it. The heat exchanger in here is an 80 by 80 millimetre. It's not 120 by 120 anymore, and it's sitting side on, so airflow is somewhat restricted. And this fridge struggles. You turn these on in 30 plus degrees and it'll be 2 hours, 2.5 hours trying to get this thing down to working temperature, because this compressor is just not able to cope with the heat load. Again, we've got this case filled with expander foam, big surface area, and when these sit out here in hot humid conditions, this is all covered in condensation, etc. So that's all just the cool escaping out of the insides, and it really struggles. Now I suspect that Dometic say, oh, this is more power efficient, this fridge, this compressor draws 1 amp less than the other one. Yeah, but it never gets there, and it runs continuously at 35 degrees. She's basically running 59 minutes out of 60, if it ever cycles off at all, but they run most of the time. The other fridge will run half of the time. Might be 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off. Now they're the substantive differences between the old and the new. So I don't think Dometic are sort of too concerned about Australia and Africa and these places, because they're probably only a very small percentage of their global market, maybe 3%, 2 or 3%. They've saved themselves some costs by reducing the size. I don't know, what the other thinking would be there. That fridge is probably still the same price, regardless. Might make $10 difference to them at the build cost for the compressor, or maybe 20, but you're talking about a $1,300 fridge or something, 1,000, 1,500, somewhere in that range. So I don't necessarily, I can't see any reason, substantial reason, except it to reduce costs of build. It hasn't reduced size. It's less efficient to run because it draws power all the time. So if you're running it on solar, it's not an efficient fridge to run. These old fridges were much better. Over a 24-hour period, this CF80 will draw a lot less power than that CFX, given the inefficiencies of the compressor and fan, etc., etc. So if you've got a dead fridge, I reckon you're better off buying an older model, because all the older model fridges have bigger compressors. They were sort of limited because I think you went to CCOP and you could get a 3.5 or a 5, that was it. So consequently, they didn't have that choice. I think now they go to the Chinese manufacturers and say, build me a 2, what's the minimum we can get away with? And so they've reduced the cost to build, and they reduced the size of the compressor. They could fit a bigger compressor in, they choose not to. So I think these older fridges are, if you look at a fridge, when it's got one job, get cold, keep stuff cold, manage your food and drinks, that's its job. You don't need Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or anything else. You need a fridge, you set it, and it's same as you do with your residential fridge. How often does anybody ever look at the temperature of the fridge? It stops, and that becomes pretty evident when your drinks start warming up or whatever else. Then you go and have a look at it. So a lot of this crap, everyone I ask, nobody ever looks at their Wi-Fi. They never use the Bluetooth. I reckon less than 1% of people probably take any notice of that. So the features that are supposed features that are fitted to these new fridges are really, you know, they're just tinsel. You know, they're just sprinkles they're put onto a product to make it look like it's a better thing. I reckon you're better off with an older fridge. Better quality componentry, better efficiency, and greater capacity to keep your stuff cool in Australia's warm climates. And you know, when you want to go to the beach and you want to take your esky down, you want it to work, and you want it to work well, and you want it to be able to keep your beer cold and your drinks cold and everything else, and be able to overcome the problems of the people opening and closing it on hot days. Because those fridges, the new fridges, struggle. Once you know, they cool down overnight, maybe it catch up at night time, but once that starts getting open and closed during the day, they just never catch up, you know, and they go backwards. These older fridges will stay ahead of it. They will easily be able to compensate for those temperatures. So have a look at second-hand ones. Don't necessarily think you're getting a good deal going and buying a new one. And these are more maintainable. They've got a more generic componentry in them. The new fridge, the CFX there, has dedicated compressor controller. You have to go and buy an original Dometic component or a Waeco component for it. You can't buy a generic aftermarket that's just as good, probably comes out of the same factory, but you can on these older fridges. We can put a new digital controller in if that fails. You know, but the refrigeration system is the thing that's important. The components in that refrigeration system, its ability and its capacity to cool and keep stuff cool under adverse conditions, are the key critical elements of a fridge, and you having a successful trip, camping trip, etc. This makes these, I think, a far better option. So, you know, have a think about what you do, or if you're going to buy a second-hand fridge, what you're going to do about that. All right, thanks for watching.